As someone who is often in front of the convoy and dragging his friends to new and remote locations, I like to have gear with a purpose. Gear that makes going out there easier. And thanks to Auxbeam, I have that gear. Their switch panels have great features, both in and out of our rigs. But that's not the only thing that I find useful. As someone who openly drives in bad weather, they have LEDs that can complement your lighting system.
So let's get into the switch panel and these LEDs. So let's go over what we actually get when we order a switch panel from Auxbeam. And in this case, we're going to be going over specifically the AR-820 unit. It is their 8-gang multifunctional switch panel. And these things also have Bluetooth connectivity. And this is what I am actually running in my LandCruiser at the moment. So let's open the box. Opening the box, the first thing we're going to be greeted to are a few QR codes here. These are for the app that Auxbeam has for controlling the actual unit itself. But other things that are pop up immediately is the manual to go over what is actually in the box, what is involved with this entire unit, how to set it up, how to wire it, as well as how to customize the individual buttons to your preferred selections. Because the buttons have different functions, such as you have the ability to do toggle on, toggle off, a momentary on, momentary off, or a strobe function just on the panel itself. And all of these functions can be done manually on the panel or via the app that Auxbeam has. On the back side of the packaging, you'll also get the sticker panel so you know what your switches are doing at any given time. But past that, the first things that are going to pop up are the power and ground cables. These things go directly from the control box to the battery or the chassis, depending on which route you want to do. They do recommend going to the actual battery, but some people don't have that option, so it is up to the end user. The other thing that pops up immediately is the wiring harness for the control box to the control panel. This will be routed from the control box to the control panel wherever you set it up. It could be inside the cab, on the exterior, or wherever you like to place it. The next thing that we encounter is this cable, which is the accessory cable. This turns the entire unit on and off. This is the turn on signal and turn off signal for the unit itself. This is hooked up to the control box, and it is using a piggyback fuse onto one of the fuse panels to signify turning it on, turning it off via the vehicle's ignition system, or you can hook this up to a switch, whatever you prefer. But other things that are included inside this box are a baggie full of hardware designed for mounting up the actual panels to the various mounts or the control box to the chassis itself. One of the big things that is also included here is a 60 amp breaker switch. This is designed so that you don't have a power surge that fries your electronics and in turn causes an electrical fire. It just prevents all of that. But this is designed to go between the car's main battery and the power box itself or the control box itself. And it's just supposed to be an inline breaker switch. That's all it is. The next thing that we can pull out is the actual control panel itself. This is the 8-gang switch. We have various modes that we can toggle on and off, as well as turning this entire unit on or off via certain buttons on here. And we can set this up to however we like. That being said, this can be mounted via the mounts provided here. We have an articulating mount right here that can be mounted to give you an adjustable angle, or a simple flat mount that can just mount this thing static somewhere and lock it into place. To be fair, I think I'm going to be using the articulating mounts more often than not, especially in my LandCruiser. I don't really have any square surfaces or flat surfaces that I can easily get to or reasonably have real estate on. So having the articulating mount allows me to have a greater variety of choice on where I want to mount things. What's also inside the box is a silicone cover designed to protect said control panel from the elements. This is particularly useful if your vehicle is exposed to the elements, such as an unexposed Jeep, your windows are down consistently, or you have an exposed cab, whatever it is. It's just designed to protect it. Other things that we can find are another set of tools, as well as the fuse taps slash piggyback fuses. These things just go inside your fuse box and you just crimp this onto the accessory cable, and this thing will now turn on and turn off the entire unit. Now actually buried deep inside the packaging here is the actual control box, which actually is the brains of the entire unit. This is where all the power is routed through. Everything is labeled on the actual unit. Inside and outside, you have postages here designating which poles are designed for which switches or which control unit. Everything has individual fuses hooked up, as well as everything is able to hook up and give you a good clear understanding of what is needed to be hooked up and where. Power cables going from the unit to the battery or the chassis are clearly marked off at the very bottom here, as well as the 4-pin connector for the actual control panel and the harness. The accessory cable is also pointed out, and the way that we mount this entire unit is at the bottom of the box. Bottom of the box, there is a set of 2 mounts here. Again, you can choose your preference. You can have a shelf style mount that is either that can be flipped up or down depending on how you wish to use it, or another flat style mount. I'm using the shelf mount, so I have a greater variety of how I can mount the actual control box and spacing, and that's just my preference. This is basically everything you get from Auxbeam when you order one of these units. But as a reminder and a disclaimer, every Auxbeam product featured in this video was provided to me by Auxbeam, but I do really like all their products in general. This entire unit actually allows me to control all of the functions so long as my ignition switch is on. I can control all my lights via the app, and it allows me to actually have more free range to do things, as well as having the ability to control the lights in certain manners that I personally prefer, like having a toggle on, toggle off, or a momentary on, momentary off, as well as a strobe feature, both of which I find very useful. But let's get to how to install this stuff onto your rig.
To get started, find a good spot to mount the box. I already had a good spot with my old box, so I'll be placing it right there. And if you already have a different control panel or switches, it's an easy transition to this platform. Whether it's a different Auxbeam unit or a different brand or system entirely, just disconnect the wires from the old unit or the old system and completely remove the old system if it becomes necessary. Now that we have some room, we can actually start the install now. Begin by installing the mounts and spacing it so that we have room to operate in the area. Now that we mounted the mount, we can now address the box and install the necessary wiring before we mount it. I start off with the largest of the wires, the power and ground cable, because they are the least flexible to deal with, so I can route everything else based on them. Then I install the control panel harness and the accessory cable inside the box and route them with the least amount of resistance so that they aren't being chafed or pinched when I close up this box. Now, with most of the necessary wiring installed, we can mount the box onto the mount that we installed earlier. From here, I use a wire to help myself pass the wiring harness and the accessory cable through the firewall and into the cab. Now with the cables through, I can work on the panel and mount it to the correct mount that I want to use, and find a suitable spot for the panel to be mounted. And at this point, we can now route the harness to the panel itself. And before we leave the inside of the cab, we should hook up the accessory cable to a fuse that is powered on when the key is on. Back under the hood, we can now hook up the accessories to the control box itself, as well as route and ground the negative cable, before hooking up the positive cable to the breaker and then to the battery. Now, rounding off this install are these LEDs for the headlights I have. These are dual color LEDs that Auxbeam has also provided to me, and I will be replacing both my Cruiser's high and low beams with them. And these are pretty easy to install on any rig. They are designed to be plug and play, so it is just like installing regular replacement bulbs for your headlights. The only real difference is that there is a little module that has to be secured or kept out of the way that's attached to the LEDs. And the install process for both high and low beam is the same on my Cruiser, so this is pretty straightforward. Nodes on tap saves me a ton of time with wiring, as well as a ton of money when it comes to dedicated lights. And having the app makes configuring everything really quick and easy, so much so that it's actually quicker to do it on the app than it is on the panel. The LEDs are also amazing to have in my headlights. Changing from white to ambers on the fly is an incredible useful feature. A big thanks to Auxbeam for hooking us up with their control panel and their LED bulbs. If you have any questions, leave a comment or hit me up on Instagram. Thanks for watching, and until next time, be safe and tread lightly.